Hey everyone, welcome back to our wild and wacky researches into the world of Earth grid networks, memetics, mind control, and everything else. Um, some imagery you might be brandished with right out of the gate from this video is maybe some familiar steganography from our last video with the V and the 5, the penta, the pentagram. Um, Anybody that's coming to this channel new, uh, you might want to go back and look at some of the old research from previous weeks that I've been doing into the Earth Grid Network, kind of as they relate to Florida Maquis' work in this regard, because as we've talked about in those videos, his Earth Grid Network that he found with the Pentagon structure factors into some symbology and some imagery, as we've called it, steganography, in a video game that's coming up, Death Stranding, in what we're calling the DC Parasite network, originating with, of course, the Pentagon, the 5 steganography. Something we haven't seen yet. I found another image for everybody who has seen those videos with more Pentagon and pentagram steganography built into this Bridges Corporation that you work for in that video game. Side note, the video game is not out. I will be playing it live to decode it in these regards when it does. But as we find out more about the game, we're probably going to solve for this riddle to what is going on with this DC Parasite network. But just some new interesting symbology I wanted to bring up before we dive into the topics of the day, because the topics of the day don't so much revolve around V as they do Q. And of course, Q was the internet phenomenon from earlier in the 2017-2018 timeframe that was supposedly on the Chan boards, where there were research threads going on concurrently with some what they call drops from this entity Q, where steganography is blanketed all over the place, as you might even be able to see just with the logo of 8chan and the conspicuous resemblance that it has to some other steganography that we've looked at recently. Oh, geez. Just a second here. The Ouroboros went away from us. There it is. I'll pop that up right there. And take that one back away. This image actually is relevant anyway, but on those keyboards, things called proofs, and we'll maybe do a more in-depth video on who Q actually is and what the progress of the research kind of led everybody to believe. But I'm not here to judge Q. I'm not here to call Q a farce or anything of a LARP like people have done. I think Q is very real. I think, but if you take a perspective on it, like we are here, I don't think some of the things that have been memetically controlled into our minds may be true. And I'll also admit that, especially with the JFK thread, I wanted to believe this whole thing so badly that I even bought into it. I got caught by the mind control meme. And what you're looking at is what the proof, right? A proof, and what they ascribe to be irrefutable proof. They, the collective anons, the anonymous collective, that were the researchers for these threads. And things in these proofs would pop up tying the clowns in America to the CIA with the similar synonym, or not synonym, but acronym. Clues that JFK apparently gave back in an interview he gave with Katie Couric just before he died. This character, Vincent Fusca, who looks just like JFK himself. Could this be the revived JFK Jr.? I still don't know, guys. I'm inclined to believe not, because look at, you've got more five eyes, 5 years, 5 steganography plastered all over this thing, for one. And some of the evidence that they purport on this just isn't compelling to me, right? The fact that the plane that he was supposedly crashed and died in came up for sale around this time is curious, but I don't think it's irrefutable proof that he was alive, or that he may even died in an airplane accident. I posit to the viewer of this video that things like this could have any number of explanations. Maybe JFK Jr. was assassinated, but the public story of him dying in an airline crash isn't true. And the plane never crashed at all, and it stayed in a hangar for 20 years. And somebody brought it out for just this occasion, for misdirection in some capacity. Of course, they're looking at even encoding things with gematria here, as we looked at in our last video. A lot of stuff goes deep with these riddles, but it fooled a lot of people. They're very well constructed memes. There's even that underlying theme of Q with the memes that we're going to dive into here. So that should be a primer of sorts on this video. We're like the Q study and the true origins of mind control, to say the least. The topics of the video are mainly going to focus around things that we've already discussed in, this is symbology I'm going to bring up later on. But steganography and memetics and various techniques for mind control that we may be manipulated through by virtue of these Q posts. I'm going to go back and quickly reference again the Ouroboros and the Chan board icon here and show you, again, with serpent to B5 as Florida Maquis decoded, it being the same shape as Chan. What they're doing is they're hijacking the twin snakes, the knowledge. They're hijacking the enlightenment that can happen here. There's going to be more symbology around this imagery later on in the video. But so, you know, this is kind of, as you guys are hoping, I'm hoping to enlighten to you. This is a meme, and it's supposed to give you something that's out of phase. And again, I'm not saying Q is false or not, but I'm going to prove there's some conspicuous evidence within V for Vendetta, within the movie, within the book, within the gunpowder plot on November 5th. There's 5 again in the book, and show kind of how all these tie together. I'm going to be going through that, showing the gunpowder plot. The evidence that we're going to show comes through this book called Rulers of Evil, which I've heavily annotated here on the side. We're actually going to read a lot of passages through this to connect the two. We're going to talk about how Jesuits implement all of their mind control tactic through the art of war. As you may have now connected, the Jesuits are the ones in question who are talking about it, creating the type of memes that we're going to be getting into. The Ignatian Way, of course, kind of the Jesuits' hand manual. But we're going to start off actually today even reading another passage from America Before by Graham Hancock and how it relates to a strand and how the Jesuits are all involved in potentially centuries of misdirection in what I suspect is an agenda. In case you guys can't see either in the 4chan boards, I'm going to scroll down here beneath the capture window. This anti-Semitism theme came up because child pedophilia, which is absolutely a problem in the world, and I think if there's anything positive that's going to come out of this Q thing, is the awareness that pedophilia happens. So in that regard, again, I don't know if Q is totally bad or good, guys, or because the fact that Q enlightened everybody to take a look at the pedophilia direction, I've got a bunch of question marks. But the linguistics changed over time too to prove it wasn't the same person. Cliff High has shown that. But, something else is being hijacked here with the anti-Semitism Star of David, because as we've looked at as well, what we have is the Merkaba shape, which is the Star of David, that takes up the Earth grid network, the inner volume of the Earth grid network in place perfectly within this sphere, and the points of the Merkaba reach these expansion joints. So it's all going to tie back together with this stuff by the end of the video, guys. I promise. Keep an open mind, as we've discussed before. But this one's going to be a little bit tough to get through because it's meaty, so I'm going to be as concise as I can. But we're already 8 minutes in. So the fact is, I think where we can start with is talking about a little bit about the Council of Nicaea, the Borgias, and what happened after the Pentecost slightly here after we get into the Graham Hancock work. But I'm going to put his book up to kind of plug it. The page we're going to be talking about picks up from, funny enough, a part of the book called Memes, the Amazon Mystery. And if anybody recalls the Florida Maquis work, of course, he's got the Alcantara base down there with the pentagon structure, and in the forest, all the other structures he's found very curiously in the Amazon, where through Graham Hancock's book, goes into great detail about the Amazon basin being populated with civilizations of up to 10 million people. And sure enough, during both the Spanish Inquisition periods and the exploration periods of the Jesuits, what culminates is mass depopulation. And the Jesuits did it all in the name of the church, the papacy, Rome. We'll get into more of Rome in that book, Rulers of Evil. But what we're talking about in specific with this passage was that this guy, Padre Fritz, and he's finding out that in his voyages to the area between 1686 and 1715, to the Amazon basin area, he led 38 Jesuit missions. And he would report back officially to historians and such, oh no, the accounts of these populations that are 10 million large, they don't exist. What we're finding is we're only finding populations of 26,000 people. He states that on these Jesuit missions, the map of the important settlements among which he had planted these missions had a combined total population of just 26,000 people. These expeditions began in the 1400s, and this is all the way in the 1700s. So what this infers to me is that somehow genocide, eugenics, something happened with a population that Graham Hancock goes into great detail to prove existed, and now to just 26,000 people that it can't be really accounted for with just even bringing diseases in and such. The Jesuits would come in, and what it says here is quite a different matter from the hundreds of thousands reported before. It continued from previous passage, of course. What are you going to say? Let us note in passing, for there is a hint here of what was really going on, that Fritz's main preoccupation, other than preaching, was to advise these small, weak village communities on how to retreat and regroup upriver to evade continual Portuguese slave raiding. So listen that, right? The Portuguese are coming in now and they're taking slaves. This is now an area that people know about. The Portuguese, the Inquisition has happened. The cultures have been dismantled over the last few hundred years. The Portuguese are now coming into a slave trade. The Jesuits are saying, no, go this other way. We're benevolent. We're of God. You can trust us. Go this other direction. Graham Hancock does not go into the speculative direction I do here, but what I do speculate, and what you'll find might be the case, is what the Jesuits were doing was actually leading the missions to get them into camps and do who knows what with them. Maybe to the same tune of the re-education that they do with the Native Americans, right? So we're going to close that one up there. Where are we going to go? So from there, guys, I just want to establish a little bit of doubt for what the Jesuit agenda is. And that's why I read that passage first, because what we're going to find here in this book, Rulers of Evil, is that what we have on our hands is probably a mass conspiracy that goes back even before those times. So remember, Jesuits and their predecessors, the Knights Templar, because that journey's about to unfold here. So for anybody unfamiliar with the Knights Templar, they are essentially the military extension of the papacy during the time of the Crusades. And a lot of truth, of course, on a different note, has been known to be kept from people from their crusades and their raids. And just a little bit of it is what we're going to go into here, because again, we're just going into the steganography of things. But eventually, the Templar Crusades, which were led after the Council of Nicaea broke up, and again, if anybody is not familiar with the Council of Nicaea, this was simply when Constantine forced upon the world a common Christianity belief. That after the Pentecost, the message was fractured such that, nobody did a very good job of keeping it together in the first place. But there was still more truth out there being debated 300 years later about what Christ's true message was. But Rome didn't like it. Rome was starting to lose its grip on things, and so Constantine in Turkey, I think in Constantinople, called this council together and basically made the new version of Christianity. And as Cliff High calls it, peak centralization happened, where all the priests were brought there, said it was going to be a debate. They got told that, no, this is how we're going to see things. How do you like it? And if anybody squabbled, they got their throats slit. And this happened only a couple of times through, enough such that anybody left standing was subjugated to accept the official narrative, and they became the priest class to squawk and parrot a new narrative that included Jesus actually being separate from the Trinity as the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, and just the Son. And you start to see how things get out of phase. Well, it didn't take long for the Crusades to incite after that. After peak centralization, you've got to go wipe the world clean of any knowledge that points to further. And so that's what the Templars kind of had a mission to do. And the Templars, in fact, did a pretty good job of controlling the narrative because they were also the money changers. So that's the stuff that, kind of, that's really worth getting into with Joseph Farrell's book, as I've mentioned in the past, because it becomes pretty fascinating how they get tied in with the Jews to do this. And so Rome and what I would call probably the Zionists are in cahoots with each other essentially at this time. And you go throughout, and there are certain plots that you can follow back through from the Templar times, even through the Borgia family, where Cesare Borgia hijacked the meme of Christ's image, Jesus's image, to be his own. And the popularized image we get in the West, I truly do believe this theory, is that Christ was a darker skinned, Middle Eastern looking, still thick, heavily bearded, but with gray eyes. Edgar Cayce has a wonderful description of him in his book that we'll get into. But that's what makes me believe that, of course, they hijacked not only his image, but they finally succeeded in hijacking the authority of God walking on earth that Rome fought and fought and fought for all those years when Jesus was here walking on the planet. And of course, what do we know about Augustus, who was alive at that time? The Caesar, trying to kind of steal the God on earth title unsuccessfully. So only after Jesus was gone for a few hundred years did they succeed. But that's kind of the backstory of the Templars. And you fast forward 1,300 years after that, instead of 300 years, the Templars' day is kind of coming to an end. And that's what we're going to explore here in the Rulers of Evil, because that's where the Jesuits that we already talked about with Graham Hancock's work kind of come into play. Constantine here, the guy who put on the Council of Nicaea, I just want to glaze over a couple passages here and talk about them briefly, because it's related. By the 4th century, 1/2 of the lands and 1/4 of the population of the Roman Empire were owned by the priests. This is what came out of that Council of Nicaea, kind of the more or less treaty in some way. This is what you get if you accept the narrative. Don't question it. We'll give you the ruling money changer responsibility. I go further. When the Roman Emperor Constantine and his Senate formally adopted Christianity as the empire's official religion after the Council of Nicaea, the exercise was more of a merger of acquisition than a revolution. And we all know why it wouldn't have been a revolution, because the priests that didn't obey were killed anyway, right? So the wealth of priests merely became the immediate possession of the Christian churches, and the priests were merely declared themselves Christians, so no longer associated with anything truly enlightening or Gnostic. The government continued without interruption. The pagan gods and the goddesses were artfully outfitted with names appropriate to Christianity. So this is where some of the memes start to change over, guys. This is where they start to put anthema memes in place. Because what did we know about anthema memes but something that is purported to be the definition of something but is not truly representative of the actual thing. And this is what they're starting to do with these names of the gods and goddesses and making them more Columbian, as you would say here in the United States. So they would change Sybil and all the gods to Mary and all the saints, more of a kind of Catholicized version of it, more palatable for people to take in, but a meme nonetheless. The Temple of Mars was reconsecrated Church of Santa Martina, with the inscription Mars hence ejected, Martina martyred maid, claims now the worship which to him is paid, right? So they start to do this all over, all of the architecture, all of the art. And playing fast and loose with Scripture, like it says here on next page 13, playing fast and loose with Scripture in order to bring every human creature into subjection to the Roman pontiff is a technique called missionary adaptation, which is what the Templars and the Jesuits implemented, which is just simply mind control mimetics through use of steganography. This explained is the adjustment of the mission subject to the cultural requirements of the mission object. I repeat, the adjustment of the mission subject to the cultural requirements of the mission object. That's saying that using this technique, this mind control mimetic technique, that the mission object, therefore, is to change the mind of the preached to, or in this case, the viewer, in a YouTube case where modern day mimetics are being propagated. And it's to change the cultural requirement subject to what they want it to be. So they're hijacking culture, just like they're doing today, with use of ancient mimetic technology, right? And what do we know about that but the temple Earth grid network, which we've studied already and propagated on. And I do encourage people to look at that stuff if they haven't yet. So from that, as much as possible in accord with the existing social shared patterns of thought, evaluation, and action, so as to avoid unnecessary and serious disorganization. So look at that. They're also saying what they do today as well. Back then, when they're changing religion itself to a construct, they're saying as much as possible in accord with existing social shared patterns, they want this to be a socially accepted thing. So they're making it a soft blow to people. They're giving concessions, which is why the Bible isn't totally out of phase. There are parts of the Bible that are, in fact, very poignant, but you didn't look any further than Jeremiah 8:8, actually, that I don't have pulled up here. I might as well share it. Jeremiah 8:8. Oh, there it is. Somebody knows I'm looking for it. Jeremiah 8:8 says, "How can you say we are wise, for we have the law of the Lord, when actually the lying pen of the scribes has handled it falsely?" So it's basically saying, how can you say that you can trust the word of the Bible when the lying pens of the scribes have handled it falsely? There's a lot of really gold nugget laid stuff like that in the Bible that you can see to see that it's a riddle, to see that a lot of it's a lie. And even the use of the word Lord associated with Yahweh is something of an alien conspiracy as it relates to Mauro Biglino's work. We're going to find out, because Lord is something very Old Testament. So this is all real subject to vast scrutiny, I would say, guys, at very least. And that's kind of the next topic of the chapter here. They're marginalizing the Bible. They come up with this idea of the Pontifex Maximus, which is essentially the Pope and the Black Pope put together, which form the basis of what we're going to find out about the Jesuits. And as Frederick Tupper Saucy goes in to explain here, Virgil's Aeneid kind of glorifies the Caesar Augustus, who succeeded his uncle Julius, as Pontifex Maximus, and they want and would rule the world as Prince of Peace, Son of God, and issue the new world order as he did. So we're starting to see it through the Pontifex Maximus. The establishment of Caesar, God on earth, Prince of Peace, Son of God, who he's not. Of course, Jesus was that. And they wanted to hijack that meme. And they've somewhat successfully done it now, because we're starting to see the use of these phrasings like New World Order as they were starting to put back in those times. I'm sorry if I'm going through this relatively quickly, guys, but I'm trying to get through a lot of content so we can get back to the Q stuff and back to how it relates to V. This is all foundational to it. So further on, what we find Frederick Tupper Saucy investigating is the inception to the weaponization of the Bible, right? And something called Medici learning, which the Jesuits ended up coining for themselves as CASUISTRY, using the Ignatian way and the art of war, right? And we're going to take a segue and look at those here in accordance to this chapter too. But during this time, it was really important that they get control of the message, because Martin Luther was busy translating the Bible into Greek, which was one of the original languages you can translate it into, which means the Old Testament wasn't so messed up. It wasn't mistranslated. So people back then were getting the truth. And we didn't have the printing press until a little bit later on, but what they ended up having to do is invent this subterfuge tactic to keep people out of phase with learning the truth, because the truth was there in the Lutheran Bible, and then the false Bible was there with the priests. So at this time, just as Leo X's corruption had ignited Luther, this is we're finding it mid battle with Martin Luther and Pope Leo X. The shrewdness determined how the church would deal with the proliferation of Bibles, because all of a sudden they're being spread out after Martin Luther translated it. Clement was personally advised by the KG Niccolo Machiavelli, the inventor of political science, who's the inventor of memes through political avenues, and Cardinal Thomas Wolsey, Chancellor of England. Machiavelli and Wolsey opined that both printing the Protestantism could be turned to Rome's advantage by employing movable type to produce a literature that would confuse, diminish, and ultimately marginalize the Bible. Cardinal Wolsey, who later found the Christ Church College at Oxford, characterized the project as to put learning against learning. And that's the terminology after Machiavelli inserted his influence. After all of this had happened in the papacy, of course, Rome's proliferation and influence continues. And before the inception of the Jesuits come back to reignite the Templars' strategies, they infuse this terminology, learning against learning. And why that's important is because an enormous trove of Gnostic learning had been brought from the Eastern Mediterranean by agents Clement VII and Grand Master Cosimo de' Medici. Suppressed since the Emperor Justinian had piously shut down the pagan colleges of Athens back in the year 529, when they were re-centralizing all the knowledge, right? These celebrated mystical, scientific, and philosophical scrolls and manuscripts flattered humanity. They taught that human intelligence was competent to determine truth from falsehood without guidance or assistance from any god. Since, as Protagoras put it, man is the measure of all things, the number 5, the V steganography, right? Number 5, the number of man from Atlantis, man could control all the living powers of the universe. If elected and initiated in the secret knowledge or gnosis, man could master the Kabbalah, the royal science of names, numbers, and symbols, to create his very own divinity. And there we have it, guys. They're using their divine way of interacting with God to their own advantage to subjugate us through memes. And they're calling gnosis a bad thing, and they're demonizing it. Really interesting, right? So what that kind of gets to is this imagery of the Pentagon again, right? And I'll put up the DC Parasite network. Got the Pentagon, the star, the Pentagon inside the star, and then of course we've got the pentagram with Baphomet's head here. And so just like taking gnosis and turning it upside down to meet the needs of their memes, what do we have here but exhibition of exactly that? We have exhibition of exactly that. And it's real curious because they're taking the power that is the penta, which is 5, the person, and they're hijacking the process of Kundalini to come up here, right? They're hijacking all of our human potential. And I'm going to take a brief segue to show you guys just a couple other examples of this. The American Cancer Society. You see 2 snakes up a pole. What you don't see are those snakes thriving to the top. What you see is the snakes resonating down here below Christ consciousness, in fact. In fact, if you were to represent this symbolism on top of the Hermes staff, which is what this is with the wings and the chakras and the twin snakes, this is the Hermetic staff that you see on all medical buildings, right? It's just a more elaborate version of it. They're keeping you down here below your power, which is your solar plexus, soul, the sun, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, from which all your power derives. And then, of course, your heart, your love, where your Merkaba is. You see the Merkaba symbolism in the Star of David, if I'll zoom in here on that. So they're keeping you through by virtue of making the web network, the bridges, the telecommunication bridges, the signals we're awash in. they're turning those signals upside down, using them against you, and making it seamless, because it's the same but out of phase, and therefore they're keeping your Kundalini energy from rising and keeping it coiled down at a lower frequency. Ever wonder why the American Heart Association has a torch in the middle of it? This doesn't look like a healthy heart to me. It never has. It's always been super weird. Why? How could an American Heart Association purport to do anything except give you heartburn? Is what this has always told me. And in fact, that's what it does. I mean, none of the research that they do here propagates anything except for a cyclical misunderstanding of cancer and how to treat it. And really, guys, it's steganography at its finest. It's turning Baphomet's head upside down, using the energy against you, and changing around what Christian values are, as Frederick Tupper Saucy talks about. Anyway, what we're gonna transition back to is going from Templars into Jesuits, because now it gets into the story of how it relates back to Q. From captured documents, it was learned that the Templars from the very beginning had renounced that Roman theologians called the religion of St. Peter, and they had been initiated into a secret Gnostic branch of the Eastern Church known as the Primitive Christian Church. Because of the primitive Christians, apostolic succession claimed to flow from John the Baptist and the Apostle John, where they were called the Johannites. The Johannites believed that although Jesus was imbued with a spiritual, holy, divine, and endowed with the most astounding qualities, he was not the true God. Consistent with Gnostic logic, the true Johannite God would never lower himself to become the vile human matter. Jesus was in fact a false Messiah sent by the powers of darkness. He was justly crucified, although when his side was pierced, he did repent of pretensions and receive divine forgiveness. Thanks to his repentance, Jesus now enjoys everlasting life in the celestial company of his saints. So the Jesuits are sitting here, and they're taking knowledge from the Templars, who initially put memes out there to demonize Christ. Unbelievable, right? Absolutely unbelievable. It's not worth getting too caught into the weeds, I guess, about that type of a thing, because it's kind of self-correcting for itself now. I think, yeah, that's a different thought for a different day. But moving on. I'm going to connect this now here with an oath that these guys take, as the society had grown in time and inherited these things from the Templars. The Jesuits, part of their swearing in, it states at the end, "I blank, now in the presence of Almighty God, the Blessed Virgin Mary, the Blessed Michael the Archangel, the Blessed Saint Paul, and all the saints, sacred hosts of heaven, and to you, my ghostly father, the Superior General of the Society of Jesus, founded by Ignatius Loyola in the pontificate of Paul III, and continued in the present, do by womb of the Virgin, the matrix of God and the rod of Jesus Christ, declare and swear that His Holiness and the Pope in Christ, Vice-Regent and his true and one head of the Catholic and Universal Church throughout the earth, and by that virtue of the keys of binding and loosing, given to His Holiness by my Savior, He hath power to depose heretical kings, etc." So, if you guys are looking at this, the Jesuits are swearing themselves not to Jesus in their works, as they've talked about in the Ignatian way. They're swearing it to the matrix of God. They subscribe to this material matrix of God. And they're swearing their allegiance and fealty to the pontificate, the Superior General, the Black Pope. If we simply open up the Ignatian way, and I'll open up this passage, guys. Pretty funny, on page 51 is where I found this. Like, remember the 51, Area 51 from the other day. In section 5, more steganography, the other forms of cultural apostolate section here, this is kind of the diluted down mission of what the Jesuits therefore took this oath for. In order to be brief, we have in the preceding section spoken almost exclusively about Jesuit high schools, colleges, and universities. But what we have said about the Jesuit philosophy of education is applicable elsewhere. The secular university also is a place for preaching the gospel specifically through cultural mediation. Preaching the gospel through cultural mediation. Mind control, controlling the public through mediating. It's exactly what they're telling you exactly what they're doing here with their intent, and they're wrapping it in this Oh, this pious tome. Yes, we have to, everybody that looks at the Jesuits, these days they're brainwashed. In the 1500s, 1400s, 1300s, these guys were looked at as the most despicable people on the earth. And again, I'm teasing, it's the very gunpowder plot that we're going to soon find out after we go into here that ties it all back together, back to Q, back to V. So furthermore, literacy programs as well as adult education classes so necessary and urgent for the future welfare of so-called undeveloped nations are likewise an apostolate characterized by the same imperative and the same spirit. Here again, it is the society's policy to pay attention to the needs of any people it means to serve in the name of the gospel. And so here we go back to the underdeveloped nations. It's the future welfare of the so-called undeveloped nations that they care about. What about Graham Hancock's mention of the Jesuits in the Amazon jungle, putting them towards what I think were re-education camps where they were either killed or re-educated. And all of a sudden, you have mass genocide in the jungle. Just a theory, right? Anyway, true intentions, of course, of the Jesuits. Very, very sneaky folks. Back to the rulers of evil. And we're on page 49, continuing onward here. I'm going to actually tie back some of the memes of astrology back into it lately. But here's where the gunpowder plot comes in, guys. Here's where it ties back into V. V for Vendetta. Anybody who remembers watching the movie or reading the graphic novel that we're going to go into here. The V steganography, the 5 steganography is all over this, so it's, of course, something related to the meme of 5 with the Zionists and the Romans. We have something of an event because when the Jesuits had become so untrustworthy amongst the people of all of Europe, essentially, when this happened, what we find is people starting to see through and distrust the Jesuits of the time as people who would mind control and force them into situations where they would be influenced into making decisions not of themselves, right? And they did this through theater, as it says here. So they did it through Shakespeare, as Frederick Tepper talks about, and they did it through fake news. And in the play Macbeth, they talk about this narrative of what would play out in the gunpowder plot, just as they do in movies, just as they do in the media today. And if one with a discerning eye can see the meme, in hindsight at least, maybe we can see forward to see what they're going to do in the future. But here's how it goes. How could a play defaming Jesuits be of service to the Jesuit agenda? Frederick asks, right? As we shall see, because he's asking about how can a Shakespeare play inform an event. He says, as we shall see, warfare in a defense of the papacy requires extravagant measures. In fact, both the gunpowder plot, which failed, and the celebration of its detection, which lives on in Macbeth, served Rome abundantly. King James I, who declared himself the plot's divinely illuminated discoverer, blamed the plot on the Jesuits and papists. According to Wills, the plot gave James his best opportunity to separate loyal and moderate Catholics from the mad extremists of the plot. In short, the plot secured England for loyal and moderate Roman Catholicism. So here's what it's saying, guys. Roman Catholics were not necessarily allowed into England at this time because of the association of the false narrative to Jesus Christ and all of the Jesuit CASUISTRY and learning against learning that they were inflicting into the mimetic public. Because of this, they weren't welcome in society. And further than that, we get that they got their kind of tendrils around a lot of, it doesn't state it here, but or somewhere else in this book, I don't know if I cited, they became the lawyers, the cobblers, the shop owners, the whoever, right, the merchants. And so they became very influential and very hard to get rid of and hard to weed out of society without causing a ruckus. King James had been able to keep them out for a period of time, but with the gunpowder plot, this was something that was in everybody's face. It was sensational news. It was that they were going to blow up Parliament. And since the plot failed, and as we'll see with the Jesuits on purpose because of the spying and subterfuge that they put into place, what we see is that they wanted this to happen, because now that King James thinks that he won, he thinks that he caught his bad guys, he thinks that he got rid of the terrorists. Now that his guard is down, now they're truly open to invasion from the Jesuits, because now the ones that are just kind of moderates, oh, they're let into society. England starts to see, oh, if you're not a Jesuit, you're just a Catholic, we'll let you in. This is exactly what was happening during these times, guys. And it goes nothing to Christians and what their true beliefs are and who people really are. I'm just telling you what had happened at the time. And eventually, the sacrifice of 8 Jesuits in the gunpowder plot, it states, was a small tactical price to pay for moving the King of England to express confidence in the Pope, and estimated at the half the population of the realm. So he was able to now control half the population of the realm from there on in. Couple more things from this book, guys, before we get back to V. The word media, the propaganda that comes out of this. Comes from, it comes from the name of, oh, here it is. Cum finis est licitus etiam media sunt licita. And it means, if the end is legal, the means are legal. So this is how they justify doing all the memes in the first place. If the means, and they do this by collecting indulgences and brainwashing, and if the means are legal, which they say, of course, since they're doing steganography, they're giving us the answers. We made a movie about it, guys. It's called V for Vendetta. Why didn't you see the message? It's all right there. We told you that we were doing this. So it's legal. You guys are the ones that have chosen to be subjugated, because clearly you're not breaking through these memes. And so the media, therefore, keeps everybody in control of the brainwash, right? That's how it all started. This book goes into some other stuff that maybe we'll get into another time, and it relates to the art of war and how the Jesuits took over the United States. But that's where the Q meme kind of picks up too, because it's all about 1776 meme and all of that. But the very fact that the gunpowder plot, guys, was the main thing around V for Vendetta, we just talked about it. As it states here, remember, the 5th of November, the gunpowder treason and plot. I know of no reason why the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. And that's what it says in the movie, of course. November 5th, 5 steganography. 5 steganography, right? V. Metal Gear Solid 5, Hideo Kojima and Death Stranding. The Bridges Network in Death Stranding. We're going to be putting this all together, everyone. So bear with me. Thanks for getting through all that with the books. But how I'm going to tie this all up now, I know this is a really long video, but the V steganography, I want to give everybody the empowerment, like I always do at the end of the video, before this, because this can tend to be a little bit sad or bad news. I want everybody to look at these. These are the fasces, F-A-S-C-E-S. And these are in Congress, and these are right in everybody's face. They're controlling our policy based on this with a fascist government. Okay? These things represent the bound wooden sticks with an axe. And they are the symbols of a fascist government. That's why they're called the fasces, right? This is brandished in everybody's face. And if we can simply look at, okay, you take all presumptions of what Q is or is not away, and just know that no matter what, our presidents, our Congress, our Senate, they're somewhat in control of the narrative with memes, but I don't know who's controlling them behind the curtain. Who's the Wizard of Oz, right? This is all kind of a show. So we need to cut through this. We need to break through the steganography, and we need to break through the mind control that's happening to get the social proof and peer pressure of Q, the repetitive message of Q, and forming an identity of an anon as Q. which is what V propagated, right? If we just go back and look at the Anon mask, they called themselves the Anons in the Q movement. It references the V5 steganography and brainwashes you right into believing that you're part of a benevolent agenda, whether it is or not. Again, I don't know what the agenda may or may not be, but we're out of phase here by not seeing the whole picture. The anonymous logo that got popularized after the movie that came out, the hacker phenomenon that was anonymous. Who's at the top? Who's the wizard controlling the world, the New World Order, the suits, the men in black? All of these things come to mind also, but guys, the other thing is the UN logo. Look at the UN logo here, right here. And then look at this. It's the exact same olive branch being extended under the guise of peace, love, and understanding, right? They've turned the Pentagon upside down, hijacked the number 5, hijacked the Christ meme. You guys are starting to hopefully see this. I'm just realizing too, if you turn this upside down, it's a Greek letter. I forget what the Greek symbolism is, maybe there's something there too that we're not seeing. But this is where all the memetics come into play. The UN, I think, thus, is somehow related to the Q agenda, to telling you as an empowered Anon that you're part of a cause, that there's proof in what we're doing here, right? But with the 8chan boards having, boy, somebody took away my Ouroboros again. With the 8chan boards being kind of the chasing your own tail, this is what it tells you, right? Chasing your own tail. You think you're in the right direction, but they're hijacking your Merkaba. They're hijacking the Earth Energy Grid network. They're implementing 5G. What do you think 5G is, guys? 5, the number 5 again, and G, the symbolism that the Freemasons use, the Rosicrucians, the people that we're talking about, the Jesuits. It's a control grid. They're really, really doing their best to control these nodal points, to inflict the parasite grid network into everybody's minds and gain control of the memetics and hide it all within timomemes, as we've talked about in the past. Franz Mesmer factors in this. He was around during all of the uprising of the American Revolution. So the mind control tactics and the propaganda being used in the pamphlets, which I'm going to point back to Noam Chomsky's work, was a representative example of, and got recorded, literally, those pamphlets as propaganda, which we only wrote about once we had a name for it in 1929, with Edward Bernays, who is Freud's nephew. I hope this is all coming together for you guys. Jesuit CASUISTRY, memetics, learning against learning, the Q meme, the V meme, the hijacking and putting out just out of phase so you think it's the truth. This is everything that we've come to realize is kind of out of phase of a society. But I want to show you one thing to close the video out, right? And this is what'll kind of blow you away, I think, is in this image here. What did I show you but just a second ago with the fasces? They've changed the back of the dime. Used to have a fascia on it with an olive branch, just like on the UN's logo. They would call this the Mercury dime. Some more steganography in this for you. They no longer do it. They've got the torch, just like the torch, I might add, on the American Cancer Society logo we looked at. But they call this the Mercury dime. And if we look at a statue of Mercury, we see actually the Hermetic staff. The Hermetic staff, the chakras, the twin snakes, the rising of the consciousness. Okay? So by implementing fascism on the country, hijacking the tool of Hermes, who is Mercury. Hermes and Mercury are the same representation, as we talked about the Jesuits using the symbolism that the Romans made Columbian. They just translated everything from Greek to Columbian. So Mercury and Hermes are the same. And they're controlling the Earth grid nodal points and your belief system based on what health really is. instead of for their fascist agenda. They're preventing your consciousness from raising. Let's go back one last time and look at the American Cancer Society, keeping everybody in cancer, burning everybody's heart up, right? It's all part of the plan. So it's up to everybody how they kind of take this. I only point this out so that we can all give ourselves strength against the Earth network that is only being implemented in front of our eyes. And I really look forward to hearing what everybody thinks about this one, because I hope that it spawns some other thought off of the topic. But questions all surrounding Q, of course, V, Florida Maquis, Parasite Grid Network, playing through the Death Stranding. We're going to figure this stuff out, sure enough, throughout the rest of the year and into next, guys. Appreciate everybody watching. Like, share, subscribe. Talk to y'all soon.